Ellen, I can't believe you turned down my parents' invitation. They were just trying to help. What's wrong with you?" Mark's words cut through me like a knife. I stared at him in disbelief, struggling to keep my composure. After 30 years of marriage, I thought he knew me better than that. "Help? You call your mother's constant meddling and criticism help?" I shot back, my voice trembling with frustration. "She wants to move in with us permanently, Mark. Don't you see how suffocating that would be?" He shook his head, his expression a mixture of exasperation and disappointment. "Mom's getting older, Ellen. She needs us." I bit my tongue, resisting the urge to remind him of all the times his mother had belittled my choices, undermined my authority as a parent, and driven a wedge between us. Nancy Peterson had made it her life's mission to control every aspect of our lives, and Mark was too blind to see it. "What about what I need, Mark?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "When was the last time you considered my feelings?" He opened his mouth to respond, but I held up my hand, cutting him off. I was tired of having the same argument, tired of feeling like an outsider in my own home. As I looked at my husband, the man I had once loved with every fiber of my being, I saw a stranger. The years had slowly chipped away at our bond, eroding the foundation of our marriage, until all that was left was a hollow shell. I thought back to the early days, when Mark's fledgling business was struggling, and I had put my own career on hold to support him. I had believed in him, in us, and sacrificed so much for the sake of our family. But somewhere along the way, that selfless devotion had become a noose around my neck, strangling the life out of me. Nancy had been there every step of the way, her sharp tongue and critical eye picking apart my every decision. And Mark, bless his soul, had always taken her side, too afraid to stand up to his overbearing mother. "I'm done, Mark," I said, my voice steady and resolute. "I've given everything to this marriage, to our family, and what have I received in return? Disrespect, neglect, and a complete disregard for my feelings." His eyes widened, and he opened his mouth to protest, but I held up my hand once more. "No, let me finish. I've spent too long trying to please everyone else, sacrificing my own happiness for the sake of keeping the peace. But not anymore." I could see the confusion and hurt etched on his face, but I felt no remorse. For the first time in years I felt alive, a fire burning within me that had been smothered for far too long. "I'm taking back control of my life, Mark, and if you can't support me in that, then maybe it's time we reevaluated our relationship." The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of decades of unspoken resentment and pain. I knew there was no turning back, no more compromises to be made. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment when I would finally stand up for myself and demand the respect I deserved. And as I looked into Mark's eyes, I saw the first glimmers of understanding dawning on him. He might not have realized it yet, but a storm was brewing, and I was the eye of the hurricane, calm and resolute, ready to unleash a fury that would shake the very foundations of our lives. The memories came flooding back, a torrent of emotions I had suppressed for far too long. I thought back to the early days of our marriage, when Mark's fledgling business was struggling, and I had put my own dreams on hold to support him. It was a sacrifice I had made willingly, believing in the strength of our love and the future we were building together. Little did I know that the seeds of my discontent had been planted long before, nurtured by the ever-present specter of Nancy Peterson, my mother-in-law from hell. From the moment I met her, Nancy had made it clear that I would never be good enough for her precious son. Her cutting remarks and disapproving glares were a constant reminder that, in her eyes, I was an interloper, a mere footnote in the grand narrative of the Peterson family legacy. "You know, Ellen, a woman's place is in the home," she would say, her voice dripping with condescension. "Mark needs a wife who can take care of him, not some career-obsessed harpy." I would bite my tongue, swallowing the bitter retorts that threatened to spill forth. Mark would simply shrug, too afraid to stand up to his domineering mother, and I would be left to seethe in silence. As the years passed, Nancy's influence only grew stronger. She would insert herself into every aspect of our lives, from the way we decorated our home to the way we raised our children, and Mark, ever the dutiful son, would acquiesce to her every whim, that leaving me feeling increasingly isolated and alone. I remember the day I discovered the truth about her interference in my life. It was a chance encounter with an old friend, one I hadn't seen in years, that opened my eyes to the depths of Nancy's manipulation. "Ellen, I've been trying to reach you for ages," my friend had said, her brow furrowed in concern. "I kept calling, but your mother-in-law said you didn't want to be disturbed." The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. All those missed opportunities, those connections I had allowed to wither and die, all because of Nancy's meddling. She had systematically cut me off from my support system, isolating me from the very people who could have helped me see the truth about my marriage. In that moment, the scales fell from my eyes, and I saw my relationship with Mark for what it truly was. A twisted web of lies and deceit, spun by a master manipulator who had been pulling the strings all along. As I looked back on those early years, I realized that the sacrifices I had made were not born of love, but of a desperate need to please, to conform to the twisted ideals that Nancy had imposed upon me. And Mark, my supposed partner in life, had been complicit in it all, content to let his mother dictate the terms of our existence. The anger that had been simmering within me for years began to boil over, a white-hot rage that threatened to consume me. How could I have been so blind, so willing to sacrifice my own happiness for the sake of a man who had never truly seen me as an equal? It was in that moment that I made a vow to myself. No more. No more sacrifices, no more compromises. I would take back control of my life, reclaim the independence that had been stolen from me, and exact a revenge so sweet that even Nancy Peterson would be forced to acknowledge the strength and resilience of the woman she had so callously underestimated. The path ahead would not be easy, but I was ready. Ready to shed the shackles of my past and embrace a future of my own making, one where I would never again be beholden to the whims of others. It was time for Ellen Morrison to rise from the ashes and take her rightful place in the world, no matter the cost. The tension in our home was palpable, a thick miasma of resentment and bitterness that hung in the air like a noxious cloud. Mark had become a stranger to me, a mere shadow of the man I had once loved, his every action a testament to the corrosive influence of his mother. It was as if a switch had been flipped, and the once attentive husband I had known had been replaced by a cold, indifferent stranger. He would come home from work, barely acknowledging my presence, and retreat to his study, shutting me out both physically and emotionally. "Mark, we need to talk," I would say, my voice trembling with a mixture of hurt and frustration. He would barely look up from his computer, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Can it wait, Ellen? I'm swamped with work." And so it would go, day after day, week after week, until the distance between us had grown into an unbridgeable chasm. I felt like a ghost in my own home, invisible and unheard, my needs and desires cast aside in favor of his all-consuming work and his mother's relentless demands. It was during one of these interminable silences that the final straw came, a betrayal so profound that it shattered what little remained of my faith in our marriage. "Ellen, you'll never guess what I just heard," my friend Diane said over the phone, her voice laced with concern. "Mark has been telling people that he's planning to sell the vacation home." The words hit me like a physical blow, stealing the breath from my lungs. The vacation home, our little slice of paradise nestled in the mountains, had been a dream we had shared for years. It was a place where we could escape the stresses of daily life, a sanctuary where we could reconnect and rekindle the flames of our love. And now, without so much as a word to me, Mark had decided to sell it, to strip away yet another piece of our shared history. "That can't be true," I stammered, even as my heart sank with the realization that it was. He would never do that without talking to me first. But deep down, I knew better. This was just the latest in a long line of betrayals, a pattern of disrespect and disregard that had become the norm in our marriage. When Mark finally came home that evening, I was waiting for him, my anger simmering just beneath the surface. "Is it true?" I demanded, my voice trembling with barely contained fury. "Are you really planning to sell the vacation home?" He had the decency to look sheepish, at least for a moment, before his expression hardened into a mask of indifference. "It's for the best, Ellen," he said, as if that simple statement could justify his actions. "Mom and Dad need the money, and it's just sitting there gathering dust." I stared at him in disbelief, my hands clenching into fists at my sides. That home is just as much mine as it is yours, Mark. How could you make such a monumental decision without even consulting me? He shrugged, his eyes already drifting back to the stack of papers on his desk. I didn't think you'd mind. It's not like we use it that much anymore. In that moment, something inside me snapped. The years of neglect, the constant prioritization of his family over our own, the utter disregard for my feelings and desires, it all came crashing down around me, a tidal wave of rage and resentment that I could no longer contain. You didn't think I'd mind? I hissed, my voice low and dangerous. You arrogant, selfish bastard. That home was our dream, our future, and you just tossed it aside like it was nothing. Mark's eyes widened, and for the first time in years I saw a flicker of fear cross his face. But I was beyond caring, beyond the point of no return. This is it, Mark, I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and resolve. This is the last straw. I'm done being treated like a second-class citizen in my own marriage. If you think for 1 second that I'm going to sit back and let you sell our home, our future, to support your precious mother, you've got another thing coming. The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of years of pent-up frustration and pain, and as I looked into Mark's eyes, I saw the first glimmers of understanding dawning on him. He might not have realized it yet, but a storm was brewing, a tempest of my own making, and I was the eye of the hurricane, calm and resolute, ready to unleash a fury that would shake the very foundations of our lives. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions, a tempestuous storm of anger and determination that threatened to consume me. Mark's dismissive attitude had been the final straw, the catalyst that set in motion a chain of events that would forever alter the course of our lives. I knew I couldn't navigate these treacherous waters alone, so I turned to the one person I could always count on, my sister Susan. She had been a rock for me throughout the years, a steadfast ally in the face of Nancy's relentless meddling and Mark's indifference. He's selling the vacation home, Susan, I said, my voice trembling with barely contained fury. Without even consulting me, without a second thought for what it means to me. Susan's eyes widened, and I could see the anger flashing across her face. That selfish bastard, she spat, her normally gentle demeanor replaced by a fierce protectiveness. After everything you've sacrificed for him, for that family, this is how he repays you? I nodded, the tears I had been holding back finally spilling down my cheeks. I can't do this anymore, Susan. I can't keep living like this, constantly disrespected and devalued. It's killing me inside. Susan reached across the table and took my hand in hers, her grip firm and reassuring. Then don't, she said, her voice resolute. You've given him more than enough chances, Ellen. It's time to take back control of your life. Her words resonated deep within me, igniting a fire that had been smoldering for far too long. She was right. I had spent years sacrificing my own happiness for the sake of a man who had long since stopped appreciating me, stopped seeing me as an equal partner in our marriage. It was time to take a stand, to reclaim the independence and self-worth that had been slowly chipped away by years of emotional neglect. You're right, I said, my voice steady and determined. I'm done being a doormat. Mark wants to sell our home, our future, without even consulting me? Fine, but he's going to pay for it. One way or another. Susan's eyes narrowed, and I could see the wheels turning in her mind. What did you have in mind? A slow smile spread across my face, a sense of calm determination settling over me. I'm going to hit him where it hurts, Susan. His business, his finances, everything he's built at the expense of our marriage. I'm going to take it all away from him, piece by piece, until he has no choice but to see me as his equal. Susan nodded slowly, a glint of admiration in her eyes. It's about time you stood up for yourself, sis. But you can't do this alone. You're going to need help, someone who knows the ins and outs of finance and can help you protect yourself. I knew exactly who she was referring to. Janet Lewis, my oldest and dearest friend, a woman who had weathered her own marital storms and emerged victorious. Janet was a force to be reckoned with, a financial powerhouse with a keen eye for strategy and a heart of pure steel. You're right, I said, my resolve hardening with each passing moment. It's time to call in the cavalry. The wheels were in motion, and there was no turning back. Mark might have thought he had won, that he could simply discard me like an unwanted relic of the past, but he was sorely mistaken. I was done being the meek, submissive wife, the one who turned a blind eye to his indiscretions and his mother's manipulations. No, this was a new chapter in my life, a rebirth of sorts, and I was determined to emerge from the ashes stronger, fiercer, and more resilient than ever before. Mark had awoken a sleeping giant, and by the time I was through with him, he would rue the day he ever dared to underestimate the power of a woman scorned. The next few days were a whirlwind of clandestine meetings and hushed conversations, as Susan and I put the wheels in motion for my grand plan of retribution. Janet Lewis, my oldest and dearest friend, was the linchpin that would hold everything together. Janet was a force to be reckoned with, a financial powerhouse who had weathered her own marital storms and emerged victorious. She was the one who had helped me secure my finances years ago, ensuring that a portion of my assets were safely tucked away beyond Mark's reach. "Ellen, you know I've always had your back," Janet said as we sat across from each other in her sleek downtown office. "But are you sure about this? Once you set this plan in motion, there's no going back." I met her gaze, my resolve unwavering. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life, Janet. Mark has taken me for granted for the last time. It's time he learned what it means to truly respect me." Janet nodded slowly, a glint of admiration in her eyes. "All right then, let's get to work." Over the next few days, Janet and I pored over financial statements, legal documents, and business records, meticulously piecing together a comprehensive picture of Mark's empire. It was a tangled web of shell companies, offshore accounts, and questionable dealings, the perfect ammunition for my revenge. As we worked, Janet would regale me with stories of her own marital struggles, tales of a husband who had grown complacent and neglectful, much like Mark. But unlike me, Janet had taken decisive action, leveraging her financial acumen to secure her independence and emerge from the ashes of her failed marriage stronger than ever before. "You know, Ellen, when I was going through my own hell, the one thing that kept me going was the strength of my friendships," she said, her voice tinged with a mixture of sadness and resolve. "My girlfriends were my rock, my support system when everything else was crumbling around me." I nodded, thinking of Susan and the unwavering support she had shown me throughout this ordeal. "I don't know what I'd do without you all," I admitted. "You've given me the courage to stand up for myself, to take back control of my life." Janet reached across the table and squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with a mixture of pride and determination. "That's what we do, Ellen. We women have to stick together, especially in the face of adversity. And trust me, once we're done with Mark, he'll never underestimate the power of a woman scorned again." With Janet's guidance, I began to quietly divert funds, siphoning off a portion of my assets into secure accounts that Mark had no knowledge of. It was a delicate dance, one that required precision and stealth, but with each transfer I felt a sense of empowerment wash over me. No longer was I the meek, submissive wife, content to let Mark and his mother dictate the terms of my existence. I was taking control, reclaiming the independence that had been stripped away from me over the years, and I was doing it on my own terms. As the pieces of my plan fell into place, I could feel the tension mounting, a palpable sense of anticipation that crackled in the air like static electricity. Mark remained oblivious, going about his daily routine with the same indifference that had become the norm in our marriage. But I knew better. I knew that the calm before the storm was merely a fleeting illusion, and that soon the tempest I had been carefully cultivating would be unleashed, shattering the fragile facade of our lives and leaving Mark to confront the harsh reality of his actions. And when that moment came, I would be ready, standing tall and resolute, a phoenix rising from the ashes of my former self, reborn in the fires of my own determination and resilience. Mark might have thought he had won, but he was about to learn a valuable lesson. Never underestimate the power of a woman who has finally found her voice. The day had finally come when I was forced to confront Mark about his disrespectful behavior. His dismissive attitude and lack of empathy had pushed me to the edge, and I could no longer ignore the pain he had caused. "Mark, we need to have an honest conversation," I said, my voice trembling with barely contained anger. "Your actions have been unacceptable, and you've shown a complete disregard for my feelings." He tried to defend himself, but I wasn't having it. You've been emotionally abusive and your behavior is inexcusable, I said, holding his gaze firmly. If you can't even acknowledge the pain you've caused, then you're not truly remorseful. Tears stung my eyes as I recounted the countless times he had dismissed my concerns and belittled my emotions. I deserved better, I said, my voice breaking. I deserved to be heard, to be respected, to have my feelings validated. He looked away, unable to meet my gaze, and I knew in that moment that I had been right to stand my ground. His inability to take responsibility for his actions was the ultimate betrayal. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation that was to come. You've left me no choice but take matters into my own hands, I said, my voice laced with determination. I will not let you continue to disrespect me or dismiss my feelings. With that, I laid out the evidence, the cold, hard facts that proved his disregard for my well-being. I presented the case, the undeniable truth that he had failed to uphold the sanctity of our relationship. He tried to defend himself, to justify his actions, but I remained resolute. I had given him every opportunity to make amends, to acknowledge his wrongdoing, but he had chosen to remain willfully ignorant. As I spoke, I could see the realization dawning in his eyes, the understanding that he had gone too far, that he had pushed me beyond the point of no return. But it was too late for apologies, too late for empty promises. I had given him every chance to make things right, to show the remorse and accountability that was expected of him. But he had failed, and now he would have to face the consequences of his actions. With a heavy heart, I delivered the final blow, the ultimatum that would either break him or force him to confront the truth. I offered him a chance to make amends, to acknowledge his wrongdoing, and commit to a path of redemption. But if he chose to remain defiant, to continue down the path of denial and self-destruction, then I would have no choice but to cut him off, to sever the ties that bound us together. The decision was his, and the consequences would be his to bear. The day of reckoning had finally arrived. I had given Mark every opportunity to make amends, to acknowledge the pain he had caused, and commit to a path of redemption. But he had remained steadfast in his denial, unwilling to confront the harsh reality of his actions. And so with a heavy heart, I prepared to deliver the final blow, the one that would shatter the fragile facade of our lives and expose the truth for all to see. It was Nancy, ever the orchestrator of family gatherings, who had unwittingly provided the perfect stage for my revenge. She had summoned the entire clan to her home, a grand affair to celebrate some meaningless milestone or another. As I stepped through the doors, I could feel the weight of the world on my shoulders, the burden of years of emotional neglect and disrespect. But I was no longer the meek, submissive wife, content to let others dictate the terms of my existence. I was a woman reborn, a phoenix rising from the ashes of my former self, and I was ready to unleash a fury that would shake the very foundations of this family. Mark was there, of course, his eyes narrowing as he caught sight of me. He knew something was amiss, could sense the shift in the air, the crackling tension that heralded the storm to come. "Ellen," he said, his voice a mixture of wariness and condescension, "I didn't think you'd show up." I met his gaze, my eyes burning with a fire that had been stoked for far too long. "Oh, I wouldn't miss this for the world, Mark," I said, my voice dripping with barely contained venom. Nancy, ever the oblivious matriarch, bustled over, her face a mask of forced cheer. "Ellen dear, so glad you could make it," she simpered, her words laced with the same thinly veiled disdain that had been a constant throughout our relationship. I smiled, a cold predatory grin that sent a shiver down her spine. "Of course, Nancy," I said, my voice saccharine sweet. "I wouldn't dream of missing the opportunity to share some family news." Mark's eyes widened, and I could see the first flickers of fear dancing across his features. He knew, in that moment, that the game was up, that the carefully constructed facade of our lives was about to come crashing down around us. With a deep breath, I turned to face the gathered crowd, my voice ringing out clear and strong. "For years, I have been the victim of emotional abuse and neglect," I began, my words cutting through the stunned silence like a knife. "My husband, Mark, has shown a complete disregard for my feelings, my needs, and my worth as a partner in our marriage." The murmurs began. a ripple of shock and disbelief that quickly grew into a roar of outrage. But I was undeterred, my resolve steeled by years of pain and sacrifice. "But that ends today," I declared, my voice rising above the clamor. "I will no longer be a silent witness to my own devaluation. I will no longer allow myself to be treated as a second-class citizen in my own home." Mark tried to interject, to stem the tide of my fury, but I silenced him with a single, withering glare. "You have betrayed me in the most profound way, Mark," I said, my voice trembling with barely contained emotion. "You have taken my love, my loyalty, my sacrifices, and cast them aside as if they were worthless, but no more." With a flourish, I produced the evidence, the damning proof of his misdeeds and financial indiscretions. The room fell silent, the weight of the revelations hanging heavy in the air. "This is the price of your neglect, Mark," I said, my voice ringing with a new strength and conviction. "This is the consequence of your disrespect and emotional abuse." Mark's face contorted with rage, his carefully cultivated mask of indifference crumbling before my very eyes, but I was unmoved, my resolve unshakable. "You thought you could control me, manipulate me into submission," I said, my voice laced with a mixture of sadness and triumph. "But you underestimated the depth of my resilience, the strength of my spirit." As I looked around the room, I saw the dawning realization in the eyes of my family and friends. They understood, in that moment, the depths of my struggle, the pain I had endured in the name of preserving a hollow facade of marital bliss. And in their eyes I saw something more, a glimmer of respect, a newfound appreciation for the woman who had emerged from the ashes of her former self, stronger, fiercer, and more resilient than ever before. It was in that moment that I knew I had won, that the shackles of my past had been well and truly broken. I was free, liberated from the chains of emotional abuse and neglect that had bound me for far too long. And as I looked at Mark, his face twisted in a mask of impotent rage, I felt a sense of pity wash over me, for he was the one who was truly trapped, a prisoner of his own hubris and arrogance, unable to see the world beyond the narrow confines of his own selfish desires. But I was done with him, done with the pain and the heartache that had defined our relationship for far too long. It was time to move on, to embrace the future that lay ahead, a future of my own making, where I would never again be beholden to the whims of others. As I turned and walked away, my head held high, I could feel the weight of the world lifting from my shoulders. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, I felt a sense of hope, a glimmer of possibility that had been all but extinguished by the darkness of my marriage. I was free, and nothing, not even the ghosts of my past, could ever take that away from me again. The weight of the world had been lifted from my shoulders, and with each step I took away from that fateful family gathering, I felt lighter, freer than I had in years. The shackles of my past had been well and truly broken, and I was finally able to breathe again, to embrace the future that lay ahead with a sense of hope and possibility. As I stepped out into the crisp autumn air, I was greeted by the warm embrace of my sister Susan. Her eyes shone with a mixture of pride and relief, a silent acknowledgment of the strength and resilience I had displayed in the face of adversity. "You did it, sis," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You stood up for yourself, and you won." I nodded, a slow smile spreading across my face. "I did, didn't I?" I mused, the weight of my actions finally sinking in. "I took back control of my life, my future." Susan pulled me into a tight hug, her arms a comforting reminder that I was not alone, that I had a support system of strong, fierce women who would always have my back. "I'm so proud of you, Ellen," she whispered. "You've shown us all what it means to be truly resilient, to never give up in the face of adversity." As we parted, I caught sight of Janet, her eyes shining with a mixture of admiration and understanding. She had been there, had walked the same path of emotional liberation that I now found myself on, and her presence was a reminder that the road ahead, while uncertain, was one that could be navigated with the right support system. "You did good, kiddo," she said, her voice laced with a mixture of pride and affection. "You showed that bastard what it means to underestimate the power of a woman scorned." I laughed, a genuine, full-bodied laugh that seemed to release years of pent-up tension and anguish. "I couldn't have done it without you, Janet," I said, reaching out to squeeze her hand. You gave me the tools, the strength, to take back control of my life." Janet waved away my gratitude, her eyes twinkling with a mixture of mischief and resolve. "Don't thank me yet, kiddo," she said. "We've still got work to do, a whole new chapter of your life to write." And with those words, I felt a sense of excitement bubbling up within me, a newfound zest for life that had been all but extinguished by the darkness of my marriage. The future was a blank canvas, waiting to be painted with the vibrant colors of my own making, and I was ready to embrace it with open arms. In the days and weeks that followed, I set about rebuilding my life, piece by piece. I found a cozy little apartment closer to Susan, a sanctuary where I could truly call the shots, where the ghosts of my past could no longer haunt me. I rediscovered old hobbies and passions that had been pushed aside in the name of keeping the peace, and I found myself reconnecting with old friends, forging new bonds, and strengthening the ties that had been strained by years of emotional neglect. It was a rebirth of sorts, a chance to reclaim the parts of myself that had been lost in the whirlwind of my marriage. And with each passing day, I felt myself growing stronger, more confident, more resilient than ever before. Of course, there were moments of doubt, fleeting shadows of insecurity that would creep in and threaten to derail my progress. But in those moments, I would turn to my support system, my sisterhood of fierce, unapologetic women who had walked the same path and emerged victorious. And in their eyes, I would see a reflection of my own strength, a reminder that I was not alone, that I had the power to shape my own destiny and forge a future that was truly my own. As I looked ahead, I couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement and possibility. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, I felt truly alive, truly free to embrace the world on my own terms. And who knows, maybe, someday, I would find the courage to open my heart to the possibility of companionship once again. But this time, it would be on my terms, with a partner who saw me as an equal, who respected and valued the strength and resilience that had carried me through the darkest of times. For now, though, I was content to simply revel in my newfound independence, to bask in the warmth of my own self-worth, and the knowledge that I had emerged from the ashes of my past, a stronger, fiercer, and more resilient woman than ever before. The future was mine to shape, and I intended to make the most of every single moment.